The dark figure streaming with fire raced towards them. The orcs yelled and poured over the stone gangways. Then Boromir raised his horn and blew. Loud the challenge rang and bellowed like the shout of many throats under the cavernous roof. For a moment the orcs quailed, and the fairy shadow halted. The echoes died as suddenly as a flame blew out by a dark wind, and the enemy advanced again. "Over the bridge!" cried Gandalf, recalling his strength. "Fly! This foe is beyond any of you. I must hold the narrow way. Fly!" Aragorn and Boromir did not heed the comment, but still held their ground, side by side, behind Gandalf. At the far end of the bridge, the others halted, just within the doorway, at the hall's end, and turned, unable to leave their leader to face the enemy alone. Balrog reached the bridge. Gandalf stood in the middle of the span, leaning on his staff in his left hand, but in his other hand, glambering and gleamed cold and white. Fly's enemy halted again, facing him, and the shadow about it reached out like two vast wings. It raised the whip, and thongs waned and cracked. Fire came from its nostrils, but Gandalf stood firm. "You cannot pass," he said. The orc stood still, and a dead silence fell. "I am a servant to the sacred fire, wielder of the fame of Arnor. You cannot pass. The dark fire will not avail you. Flame of Undor, go back to the shadows. You cannot pass." The Balrog made no answer. The fire in it seemed to die, but the darkness grew. It stepped forward, slowly to the bridge, and suddenly it drew itself up to a great height, and its wings were spread from wall to wall, but still Gandalf could be seen, glimmering in the gloom. He seemed small and altogether alone, grey and bent, like a wizened tree before the onset of a storm. From out of the shadows a red sword leaped, flaming, glamoring, glinting, white in answer. There was a ringing crash, and a stab of white fire. The Balrog fell back, and its sword flew up in molten fragments. The wizard swayed on the bridge, stepped back a pace, and then again stood still. "You cannot pass!" With a bound the Balrog leapt full upon the bridge, its whip whirling and hissed. "He cannot stand alone!" cried Aragorn suddenly, and ran back along the bridge. "Elendil!" he shouted. "I am with you, Gandalf!" "Gondor!" cried Boromir, and leaped after him. At that moment Gandalf lifted his staff, and crying aloud, he smelt the bridge before him. The staff broke asunder and fell from his hand. A blinding sheet of white flame sprang up. The bridge cracked right at the Balrog's feet. It broke, and stone upon which it stood crashed into the gulf, while the rest remained, poised, like a tongue of rock, thirst into emptiness. With a terrible cry, the Balrog fell forward, and its shadow plunged down and vanished. But even as it fell, it swung its whip, and thongs lashed and curled about the wizard's knees, dragging him into the brink. He staggered and fell, grasping vainly at the stone. He slipped into the abyss. "Fly, you fool!" he cried, and was gone. The fires went out, the blank darkness fell. The company stood, rooted with horror, staring into the pit. Even as Aragorn and Boromir came flying back, the rest of the bridge cracked and fell. With a cry, Aragorn roused them. "Come, I will lead you now," he called. "We must obey his last command. Follow me." They stumbled wildly up the great stairs beyond the door, Aragorn leading Boromir at the rear. At the top was a wide enclosing passage. Along this they fled. Frodo heard Sam at his side, weeping, and he found that himself was weeping as he ran. The drum beats rolled behind, mournful now, slow.